Welcome back to Nightmare Logic, where music soothes our savage souls. We're your hosts, Christopher Smith
and Peter Sawyer.
And today we are going to sing the praises of our favorite horror songs and soundtracks. Peter, it's good to see you.
You too, man, and happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Probably just get out of the way real quick that it's just going to be me and Peter today. Taffeta is still getting over her illness that has set her back quite a bit, and we wish her a speedy recovery, and I hope she feels better.
Yeah, Taffeta, I'm sorry. I know you were hoping to do this episode, so I know a couple things she was going to say, I think, so I will do my best to honor that.
Yeah. So Peter, it's been 2 weeks since we recorded. Have you seen anything, done anything, any updates you want to share?
This is my update. So that was Nightlife, which was a made-for-TV horror comedy in the late 80s. And I mentioned this on an earlier episode that I had done voice commentary with David Delval on it, and it is out. So that's kind of exciting. They sell it at Amoeba. Kino Lorber put it out. If you are a sucker for 80s horror comedy, you might get a kick out of it.
Hell yeah. I got to check that out too. I'd love to hear you on the DVD commentary track. But what's your verdict on the movie? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Thumbs up. I was pleasantly surprised.
Cool.
Like has some actual pretty funny moments. I mean, it never gets super scary, but it's, it kind of struck a interesting balance. And it was smart. Like it was a smarter, clever little movie.
Hell yeah.
So it's cool that it's out there.
Great. Nightlife with Peter and David Duvall on the commentary released by Kino Lorber. Check it out. Did you see anything?
Yeah, I saw a few things. I finally checked out Widow's Bay, and you were right. It's great. I'm 2 episodes in, so I don't know that much about what's going on, but it reminds me a lot of like kind of Stephen King stuff. The town, and then something's coming, and they're trying to figure out what. And you have a skeptic, and it's second episode kind of reminded me of the Innkeepers a little bit. But yeah, I've been enjoying it, and I've just heard nothing but good things. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Christopher.
Oh yeah, of course, man. I like about 4 or 5 episodes in, and then we're having some like Apple TV Plus subscription thing that we got we're like switching over all of our accounts to be like shared accounts. So like we're in the middle of doing that, and so I'm like locked out of Apple Plus for a little bit. So but I want to get back on it, so I'm gonna make sure we take care of that this week. Along those lines, I saw The Burrows, the whole series, and it's not as strong as Stranger Things, but it's also pretty good. And I guess they're not even going to make a season 2. It got canceled, even though it was in the top 10.
Shit. That surprised me. I haven't seen it, but just because you're like, yeah, it's the Duffer Brothers, and that was like their Stranger Things was their bread and butter. As far as shows go. So it seemed like even if this wasn't as strong, I'm surprised.
I think it's I guess there's probably 2 things. I mean, I'm just guessing. They didn't really release a reason, and even Julianne Moore, she even said she didn't know why. So it seems like a little bit of a mystery. But if I were guessing, just from watching it, I could see how the story just kind of like wraps up, and I feel like a second season might feel contrived. So I kind of get it. Like, I don't know that you need a second season of that story. Also, a lot of times they do these series, like they have the Duffer Brothers under their like $100 whatever $million contract to develop a certain amount of projects, like a slate for them. And it could be that they were kind of going through the motions with this one, but like, you never know. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes they make things because they have to. I think less these days, but back in the day, they would make like pilots and stuff. And sometimes they would make a pilot just because they were, the deal behind the scenes required them to make the pilot, but then they wouldn't pick it up to a series. So I kind of wonder if there's something like that going on where like, I could totally be reading into this, but.
Well, I mean, a lot of times it's the reasons we don't know. So we start speculating.
But it was good. I mean, like, I don't think it was like a waste of money,
It's on my list. I was curious about it.
It's like Stephen Kingy, you know what I mean? Like it's not
Right.
like pure horror or like sci-fi or whatever. It's like definitely pop culture oriented, but like it's like a fun watch.
I feel like Stephen King kind of set the blueprint for like following a community through some kind of like horror secret of someplace.
Yeah.
Like it's you're always going to think of him when it comes to that because of
Yeah.
how much of it we got out of him. Um,
Totally. And it also kind of has some pluribus parallels if you've seen pluribus. I that could just be because they both take place in like a desert environment,
right.
but there is something about because in pluribus she also lives on a cul-de-sac, and these stars in this all live on a cul-de-sac, and so like there's some things like that.
Well, I will say the kind of ironic thing is, on one hand, now that the Bros is canceled, I'm like, do I really want to watch it? But on the other hand, it's like, well, it's you're only going to get so much, so maybe that's a reason to.
Yeah, I mean, just view it like it's a complete story. Just view it like a
Okay,
mini
that's
series.
good to know.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So, what did you see? Any movies or anything?
Yeah, I saw. I have a couple movies I want to talk about. One is, and I don't know if you ever feel this way, but I always do, and therefore, like as many movies as I've seen, there's some movies that I have not seen that I should have seen years and years ago.
Oh yeah,
but
I
be,
got one of those too. Yeah,
but because I haven't seen it, it's like homework. I'm like procrastinate and don't
yep,
see it. It's
yep.
like if something's in the theater now, it's like okay, it'll come out whatever, I'll see it. But in this case, it's the original House on Haunted Hill. I'd actually started it a few years ago, and I think I ended up falling asleep and then just never watched it. But it's a William Castle movie, Vincent Price. If you've seen the remake, I would say that's actually scarier. It's more cutting edge, but it's similar plot, right? Where you got Vincent Price's characters have invited a bunch of guests to this haunted house to stay the night, and if they do, they'll get $10,000 each. And then, of course, at a certain point, they get locked in and kind of have to deal with it. Um, but yeah, it was still had a couple pretty good scares for its time. Kept my engagement the whole time. It's only an hour and 12 minutes, which I liked because I'm like, damn, man, all these 2 hour plus movies. So that was just a quick, easy watch.
Nice, nice. Yeah,
It's
I
out
did.
there.
I had a similar kind of experience. I watched Fright Night last night.
Which one,
Um,
the original or the?
I had the '80s Fright Night.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Is that the
Tom
original? I don't
Holland.
even know.
That's the original. There's
Okay.
two from the 80s, and then there was a remake and then a remake sequel.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I just saw it on Shutter, and I was like, this has come up a few times, and I thought I had already seen it, but I started watching. I realized I hadn't, and it was interesting. It had that vibe of like '80s, like a John Hughes movie meets a horror movie or something.
Right.
So it was like, it was fun, but it's definitely geared, I feel like, towards a younger audience. It wasn't like the scariest thing ever. In fact, through today's lens, there are some moments that are just like funny. And I think when they're trying to be scary, but I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. The outfits and the music and the '80s styling were just like, chef's kiss, and the makeup though of like the vampire teeth and stuff, particularly with his love interest, were like, it looked amazing.
Yeah, there's that shot where Charlie, I think, is the kid, and he looks out the window and he sees the vampire, and he pulls down and you see his nails.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. In the music, yeah, it's a great movie.
yeah. Heather walked in like near the end, and she brought up a really good point. And she's like, "Man, in the '80s, they really just drew out every scene. Like, there's like 8 cuts of this, and it's just the editing is like so much slower paced and everything. It's pretty funny
Yeah,
actually, but
no, she's right.
yeah,
And Tom Holland, who directed it, he also directed Child's Play. So he has this theme of like there being a threat that exists and no one will believe you, which is a
hmm
pretty cool conceit for a premise, right? You have a vampire
totally,
that lives next door to you, and who the fuck's gonna believe you? Um,
yeah. And then I also saw Backrooms, which I hadn't seen the last time we recorded, but
oh
obviously I'm
yeah,
gonna have to go check that out. And I enjoyed it. I've talked to you since then, and I agree with the point you were talking about this scene that kind of like just felt a little abrupt and and it kind of killed the momentum a little bit of the story. But
Right.
I still think it was very strong. I think the production design was amazing. I kind of felt like I was in if you know, like the modern art museum in New York, like PS1 or something.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it was a very unique film. Like we don't. That's what's great about horror now, is we're getting a lot of like fresh ideas and fresh visions of what horror movies can be, and even if they don't like bat 100, there's still an interesting angle to like look at a horror film, and I feel like Backrooms really did that.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. Well, I'm glad you saw it.
Yeah, in addition to Backrooms, you actually told me about a movie that you watched on Shutter, Whistle, and I went and watched it too. What did you think about that?
So I have mixed thoughts. Like I enjoyed it for what it was. I feel like with horror these days, you're either seeing remakes, IPs, or you're seeing like very indie A24 neon type stuff. And this felt more like the type of movie you'd see 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that.
So that's what I kind of liked about it, because I was like, oh, I haven't seen one of these in a while, and it had a budget. So it stars Daphne Keene, right? And she's this recovering addict at a new school, living with her cousin. Her father's died, so she's listening to his record collection to get to know him, which I thought was
Mhm.
a cool way to kind of present the soundtrack of it. But the crazy thing, and I may have mentioned this to you, Christopher, is like she looks like a spitting image of Anya, my wife, when I met her. So that was kind of surreal, because I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's very weird when someone looks that familiar to you. Um, but yeah, I liked it because it felt like a movie from another time. Kind of like a decent sized budget horror movie that's just for fun. And I thought the soundtrack added a lot to it. Like it had "Back to the Wall" by the Divinyls, which makes me think of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, because it was from that. The "Dark and Lonely Night" by Tiger Army, I was not familiar with, and I like the band, and I thought that was suitable. It had "Time After Time," Cyndi Lauper, Concrete Blonde, the song "Joey," ended with "Killers" by Iron Maiden. So I kind of appreciated the care that went into that, you know?
Nice. Yeah, totally. Have similar feelings about the movie. I just really liked it as had some rough edges, and wasn't like 100%, it wasn't like deep cinema or anything like that, but it was so
Right,
much
right.
fun. I really enjoyed just like watching it. And like you said, the kind of kills and gore were like fun. And, just all in all, it was fun. And I like movies that kind of show their heart, even when they're rough, and I think that did that. So,
Yeah, yeah. So it was because I think I had heard bad things, so I went in with very low expectations, and then
yeah,
was
totally. And
pleasantly
I also get
surprised.
why people might, only give it a 5 or a 6 because of those rough spots. But I think like at its core, it was like a pretty good movie.
Right. Yeah, it was enjoyable. And the other movie I saw that I just want to mention, it's not horror, but it's genre, and I think people will get a kick out of it. And that was Is God Is, written and directed by Alicia Harris. It stars Kara Young and Mallory Johnson, his two twin sisters who were burned when they were babies. And one of them has it like on her arm. I think that's Kara's character. And the other one's like completely burned. So they grow up, and one of them's the one that's not as burned, is always like defending her sister and kind of is this little badass. But basically, they go and they meet their birth mom, who is burnt head to toe, and that's played by Vivica A. Fox, and she tells them to go kill their birth father, who did this to them. So it becomes this kind of Quentin Tarantino-ish revenge movie with a lot of style, and it has a lot of heart that I did not see coming, and it kind of progressively got better as it went. And there's a lot of little twists and turns, and there's carnage, and yeah, there's a really fun scene with Janelle Monáe as well. So I expect a lot of good things out of Alicia Harris. Like I really really enjoyed that.
Nice. Nice. All right. Well, moving on to our news. Um, we actually there was a lot of news in the last couple of weeks, but I'm gonna just, I tried to cherry pick some of the more interesting ones that I came across. Like first, we got I don't know if I guess it's a teaser, but it's kind of like just a chunk of the film for Whale Fall, which is coming out soon, and it's really great. I sent it to you, I think, and you saw it too,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I thought it was great.
yeah. It's I'm kind of looking forward to this one. Speaking of unique angles on horror films, if you even could call it a horror film, I'm not sure, but it's kind of a survival nature film, but with you know a lot of terror in the story. But we're gonna post a link to that clip on the show notes, so feel free to go check that out. And I have some on here that I was going to ask Taffeta about, and since she's not here, I'll do my best to talk about them. But they're kind of comic related, which is not my forte. So apparently, there's a lot of rumors about Absolute Batman, which was a fairly successful storyline in the Batman comic books. But there's a lot of rumors ahead of San Diego Comic Con that they're going to announce it as a live action series or film or something. So we're going to have to keep our eye out for that one. But this was all a lot of these rumors were already kind of swirling a bit, but they were really kind of kicked into high gear by a post by a comic book influencer, Josh's Comic Books, who posted this quote unquote. I can say with absolute certainty that that I have absolutely no evidence that an absolute Batman anime movie is in the works. Better grab your copies now before this completely unfounded rumor sends prices to the moon. For legal reasons, I made this up. And I'll link to that post in our show notes as well. But um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not that familiar with this particular storyline, but there seems to be a lot of excitement around it. So if you're interested in Batman and Batman films, keep your eye out for that. But what I did learn through researching this story is that Batman remains DC's highest grossing property by far and is still its most popular. So that's interesting. I guess it makes sense. I don't know what else it would be. Superman, maybe, I guess. But for our next story, we're learning that there's going to be a live action, straight to series adaptation of a novel based on an RPG that some of you might be familiar with. It's called Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is a bit of a tongue twister, really. I had to practice a few times. But Dungeon Crawler Carl, it's an is an adaptation of Matt Dinniman's popular science fantasy lit RPG books, and it's going to be produced by Seth MacFarlane, his company Fuzzy Door, and Universal Global Television. I have a feeling that I don't know anything about the RPG or the novels, but they seem like there's a bit of a humorous element to them. But I imagine there's some fans out there, so keep your eye out for that. According to Deadline, in Dungeon Crawler Carl, written for television by film and TV, and comic book writer Chris Yost, an alien invasion has wiped out most of humanity, and any survivors are forced to fight for their lives on a sadistic intergalactic game show. Sounds bad, right? Now try doing it with bare feet and stuck up, self centered, tiara wearing talking cat as your partner. So that kind of sets the stage for what you're into. Sounds kind of fun. And if they do it right, maybe it's going to be like something kind of like batshit crazy we haven't seen before and really cool and fun for all of us people not familiar with the novel or RPG.
Right.
I mean, who knows? But it's cool to see companies like Peacock and these like bigger studios taking risks. So they're not taking that big of a risk because it is an IP already, but like it's a risky IP, I think.
I mean, it's got Seth MacFarlane behind it, so
Yeah,
I'm sure that helps a lot, you
yeah,
know?
100%. Yeah, yeah. I mean, everything he touches seems to work. So great. So the next news item that we would like to discuss here is that apparently Curry Barker has inked a new horror film deal for an original script with Universal, and he will write, produce, and direct his untitled fourth film for Blumhouse, Atomic Monster, and Universal, which is described as like an eight-figure deal. Which I guess once you knock it out of the park like you did with Obsession, uh, you can command those big bucks. It sounds like there's a bit of a bidding war with this one too. So he's currently in post production on Anything But Ghosts, his upcoming supernatural horror feature for Focus Features, and that film is also with Blumhouse and Atomic Monster, producer Roy Lee, Spooky Pictures. And it's starring, I think, what, Aaron Paul, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Violet McGraw. So that sounds like it's going to be a good one. I don't know anything about it, honestly, other than that. But the title, Anything But Ghosts, I think is like a pretty great title. So I'm kind of like,
It
interested to see
it
where that goes.
keeps screwing me. There's a book called Head Full of Ghosts, and that they're making that into a movie, and so I keep thinking of that. um,
Nice, nice. Well, hopefully they're both good. But I guess he's also attached to do the reimagining of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for
right.
A24. So
I'd heard that, which
yeah,
is it's also different than the series they're doing, right? Isn't there? Are they doing a A20 or a Texas Chainsaw Massacre
yeah, they're doing
series?
a like a prequel series. So uh,
Building a universe,
yeah, yeah. I
maybe.
mean, that's what we do these days, right? But I mean, after Obsession, and Curry Barker's clearly, you know, one of the hottest names in horror at the moment, along with, you know, friend of the pod, Zach Kreger. And I imagine Kane Parsons is
Yeah,
now in
Kane
that
Parsons, I
world
would say
too.
is up there. Kane Parsons was asked about doing remakes, and he has no interest, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we'll see when the
yeah.
money comes knocking.
Well, it probably is coming knocking.
Right, exactly. He's probably like really rethinking those words right about now. Yeah.
Maybe. I
So,
mean, I don't know. Can't speak for him.
well, we have another story here, which I chose just for you, Peter.
Oh no, I know what this is. And I'm gonna say no comment, but all right, go for it.
So, Glenn Danzig is set to direct an adaptation of his comic book Hellmask. This project is going to be his third feature as a director, and he's previously dove into his other comic book properties on the screen with Veratica, which I believe you sent me in a text that you did not like very much. And he also directed this vampire spaghetti western, Death Rider, in the House of Vampires, which came out in 2021, which I hadn't heard of either of them. So clearly they weren't big hits, so to speak.
Well, I think it's pronounced Veronica. Um, when that came out, people were very curious because Glenn Danzig loves horror. The Misfits were considered horror punk. He did reviews for Flipside magazine back in the day, talking about movies he liked and did not like. So he, I guess, was kind of my theory is because of the Misfit reunions, he had money that he's like, I'm gonna fund my own movies and do it that way. So when Veronica came out, yeah, did not get the reaction he was hoping for. I think like there's a famous thing where he's like shows it and everyone's laughing, and that's not what he wanted.
Right.
And so I felt obligated to watch it, and there is a reason it is a 2 on IMDb.
Two.
Um,
Wow. I didn't realize it was that poorly rated.
it's it's a weird. I think he was trying to do this Gene Roland type thing. Who's like this kind of Euro trash, 70s, 80s. I don't know. It makes strange movies. And I did see like one clip that was on Shutter before the movie. I was like, oh, that's actually looks very interesting. But when you see it all together, it's like, wait, what's going on? And things are very drawn out. And I don't want to like trash his movie, but yeah, it was not what I was hoping for. I think a lot of people were hoping for something scary, and this was a little bit different than that. But who knows? Maybe Danzig has spent the last few years being like, all right, I'm going to show them these motherfuckers like how it's done and studied up and all that.
Yeah.
Who really knows?
Well,
Uh,
let's hope for the best. But per the log line, so this story is set against a brutal medieval backdrop filled with dark magic, armored warriors, and massive bloody battle scenes. Hellmask follows a violent supernatural tale steeped in gothic atmosphere, which sounds great. It sounds like it's a high budget film, but I have a feeling it's not. They're not going to have a high budget, which makes me concerned a little bit. But fingers crossed, because we all would love him to land on his feet and make a banger of a film.
his Death Riders one, which I haven't seen, the vampire Western movie, that had Julian Sands and Devin Sawa. It had like some names in it.
Mm,
But I have not seen it,
right.
so I can't comment on that.
All right. Well, you got homework to do.
Uh, don't I always?
All right. Well, you said you had a couple other news things you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I got two movies to share that are coming out oddly the same day, which is a weird coincidence. Um, so the first is Christopher. Are you familiar with Too Many Cooks by any chance?
Yeah, I remember that coming out and being viral. I appreciated it for its like artistic quality, but I didn't see like why it was so beloved.
It's just like I knew nothing about it and randomly stumbled across it and was like, "What the fuck is this?" With all the sitcom montages going
Mhm.
over and over, and then Lars von Trier appearing up and just being like this crazy absurdist horror kind of piece by the end of it. Anyway, the creator of that, or one of the creators, Casper Kelly, who he was a writer and he directed it, has a new movie coming out. And if you haven't seen Too Many Cooks, but you've seen Mandy, he was responsible for the Cheddar Goblin bit, and he did the Fun Size segment on VHS Halloween. So if you're familiar with any of those, you kind of get his sensibility. But he has this movie coming out August 28th called Buddy, and it's where a brave girl and her friend must escape a kid's television show. The concept makes me think of this movie on Hulu from a couple of years ago called Mr. Crockett. Um, and this one stars Kristen Milioti, who was in the movie Palm Springs, and she was on Black Mirror. It has Topher Grace, that 70s show, and some other stuff. Patton Oswalt, Michael Shannon, and Keegan Michael Key from Key and Peele. So I think that might be interesting, but it might be very like absurdist. So it might be something that
Well, it
appeals
sounds
to
like it.
certain people.
Yeah, well, like it kind of sounds like it would be perfect for his style, his aesthetic.
Yeah. No,
So,
totally. It makes a lot of sense on paper for sure. Um, and one other movie that also is coming out August 28th, Yeon Sang Hu, or how I think that's how you say his name. He's the guy who brought us Train to Busan, which is a great zombie movie with a lot of heart. Actually, it's a very touching movie. He has a movie called Colony coming out, and that's about someone named Professor Se Young. He attends a biotech conference only to witness it spiral into a catastrophe when a rapidly mutating virus is unleashed. As the outbreak spreads and the infected begin to transform, authorities seal off the entire facility. And that stars Ku Kaio Hwan, who is in the sequel to Train to Busan Peninsula, and Jun Jae Hyun, who was on the series Kingdom. I watched the trailer for that, and I thought that looked fun. Like if you like zombie stuff, it looked like it was hitting that mark.
nice, nice. Yeah, I want to check that out actually. Great. Well, let's get into the releases. And again, since we switched to bi-weekly schedule, we're going to do 2 weekends, June 26th and July 3rd. Uh, so for the weekend of June 26th, the big release is Supergirl for DC, and that's written by Anna Noguera and directed by Craig Gillespie, who did Fright Night, which is part of why it was on my mind to watch last night.
He
Uh,
did the
oh,
remake of
one
Fright
of the
Night,
newer ones, I guess. Yeah,
right?
right. He also did I, Tanya and Lars and the Real Girl. So he's a good director. I would see what he does with a big, DC tentpole. It stars Millie Alcock of House of the Dragon and Pine Gap, David Cornsweet from Pearl and We Own This City, and Eve Ridley, who was in The Witcher and Three Body Problem for Netflix. And in the short synopsis is Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, joins forces with an unlikely companion on an interstellar journey of vengeance and justice when an unexpected adversary strikes too close to home. You know, you could almost insert any superhero into that description and it
Right.
work. Um, we'll see if it's good. I tend to think DC movies are better than Marvel movies, but like, uh, it's just, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm just a little like a
Fatigue.
superhero movie needs to be like unique now for me to like be interested in seeing it really.
Right. I mean, I think that's why, like, at least I didn't see this Joker sequel, but the first one I thought was fantastic because it
Oh
was
yeah.
nothing like a superhero movie. I mean, it's a villain, but
And
um,
Logan was so good,
yeah, Logan
you
was
know.
great.
And a lot of people liked WandaVision. I didn't actually see WandaVision, but another example of that.
Yeah,
Oh,
the unconventional kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, and apparently Clayface too, which I still haven't seen, but I guess. Oh, sorry. Um, I'm thinking of not Clayface also, which is the horror movie
In
uh,
the fall. Yeah.
that's coming out. Yeah, but I was thinking of the series, The Penguin, which is more of
Mm,
a noir kind of vibe and supposedly really
right.
good, and which I haven't seen yet. So the next film coming out on the 26th is a horror film called Camp. And at first I was like, oh, is this, did they rename the film that you worked on?
No. They did post something about that it's like stay tuned on Instagram last week, so
Oh, cool. It's
maybe
Camp,
they're
Camp Sleep,
Camp Triple Moon.
Camp Triple Moon. That's right. So this is just called Camp, and it's written and directed by Avalon Fast, who did another small indie horror called Honeycomb before that. And it stars Zola Grimmer, Alice Wadsworth, and Cherry Moore, and they're basically all unknowns. Alice Wadsworth's been in like a couple of small things I've never heard of, like Eyes in the Woods and Cowboys Against Thunder. But other than that, the other two are first timers. And this movie, it's doing a theatrical release, but it's like there's a lot of unknowns about it.
That's kind of exciting because you just don't know, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Like it could be good, but we'll see. I guess the jury's out. So the short synopsis of this is a story of impossible redemption, modern witchcraft, and duels that repeat themselves like curse cycles. And what I got from it from watching the trailer was it's kind of focused around a few girls at a sleepaway camp who seem like they're witches or they're very witchy, and maybe
Right.
they're like trying to get revenge or something on other people, maybe guys. I'm not sure, but it actually didn't look bad based on the trailer. Like, I mean, I think there's an audience for it. Maybe geared a little more towards like younger people, like in the teens, early
Yeah, of that
20s.
age.
Yeah,
It's like the craft is
I
what
was
comes
gonna
to
say it
mind.
had a craft vibe for sure.
Right. So, yeah, that could be cool.
And then we have a mysterious series coming out a couple days after that weekend, which I can't find really any information on, but apparently there's like 8 episodes of this series, so it's got to be for a streamer, but I couldn't figure out what streamer. I couldn't figure out, like, I didn't find any trade articles about it or anything, so I don't know. So jury's out on whether this is worth checking out or even if you can check it out. But it's called The Paradise Valley Incident, and it's writer, showrunner, or director J.K. Shahan, Shahan. And the premise is in 2018, a small neighborhood in Nevada would face a horrifying and disturbing incident regarding the introduction of psychosis targeted pharmaceutical drug octrazine that would haunt the town for years to come, which could be actually potentially sounds like an intriguing premise. But again, since I can't find out anything about it, we'll see. Okay, and that's it for that week. The following week, the weekend of July 3rd, there's basically not much being released that, at least that in the genre horror space. So it's going to be a slow weekend. You could catch up on some of these that have been coming out at a rapid clip in the winter and spring here. With that, it brings us on to the main topic of today's conversation, which should be a fun one. And Peter's going to lead the discussion on this one and give us a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. So as you probably picked up by the intro, we're going to be talking about soundtracks, not so really scores. I think we're going to try to save doing scores to when we actually have a composer on. But soundtracks are such a big part of a movie. And growing up, if you watch
Well, real
them,
quick, I think just to piggyback on what you just said, I just want to clarify we're talking about soundtracks that are essentially licensed songs. So not like just pure music. Like these are like songs like you might hear on the radio and things like that. And I make that distinction just because, when I was doing research for this, anytime I would Google soundtracks, it included, scores
the
as well.
scores.
So like what Peter's saying is like basically like this is like songs.
Yeah, and I mean, what's even interesting about that is some movies have a lot of interesting songs in them, and then don't have the license to put out the soundtrack.
Right, right.
So we'll probably be touching on some of those, but uh, horror movies are a lot of them are known for their soundtracks, and so it's just kind of an interesting topic if you grew up watching these because it probably introduced you to one of your favorite bands or opened your mind to new music or something. So it just seemed like a fun reason to talk about it. Like we mentioned that movie Whistle, which I thought had a pretty interesting soundtrack that caught me off guard.
Totally. And the way that they integrate songs into the film too, in horror films, like, can be really interesting and unique because, a lot of times, um, it opens up the opportunity, right, for like contrasting potentially pop music or heavy metal or something like that with like horrific elements. And so you could do some really clever, unique things. Like, it doesn't always have to be like a scary song.
Right. I mean, it's like for one example, the song "Goodbye Horses" by Q Lazarus. They play that at 80s clubs, 80s nights, goth nights, whatever. But if you hear that song, your mind is probably going to Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, right? Like,
Yeah.
they just have this kind of magical way of taking you to that. But the impact of this is really interesting if you track like modern day because look at Stranger Things, right? The Stranger Things effect is where Kate Bush running up that hill was, I think it was on a couple of the episodes of the second to last season. You had Purple Rain and When Doves Cry by Prince, Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. These songs all started charting again. Past the Duchy by Musical Youth had a 1,030 spike in global streams. Then you have Depeche Mode's "Never Let Me Down" that charted, and that was using the Last of Us.
Yeah.
So it's
I really
telling.
enjoy that. It's like, it's fun to see, these artists who like just sitting around enjoying, the end of, their golden years
Yeah,
or whatever. And then all of a sudden they're like charting again and like, potentially higher than they did originally, which is like crazy. It must be such a crazy set of circumstances for them.
yeah. I mean, it's all all of a sudden these artists get popular, and it's not stuff that's like again with horror. A lot of that stuff isn't always played on the radio, so you're getting kind of edgier, deeper cuts that shows like Stranger Things want to kind of include. So it's pretty fascinating. And I mentioned the Iron Maiden song used in Whistle, and I was reading an interview with the guy, and he's like, yeah, they just used it in the finale or one of the last episodes of Stranger Things, and it was also in like the last 28 Days Later. So Iron Maiden is currently being used a lot. Um, so the format, we're gonna propose a couple questions to each other to talk about moments in films, talk about some of our favorite soundtracks, and I'm sure we both have anecdotes about them, as well as I feel like there's certain horror movie soundtracks you kind of have to touch on because they were such a big part of the movie and its identity.
Hmm.
But if we get into like where sound came into film, I'm just gonna go through this really quick because it's kind of fascinating. The first sound movie that had the first film that had sound was actually like in 1894. It's called the Dickinson Experimental Sound, and it was known for having live recorded sound made by William Dickinson, and they used a phonograph that I think Edison was responsible for. But it's interesting because if you look at that and that's like, all right, well, late 1800s, it wasn't until Don Juan in 1926 featured a synchronized musical score and sound effects and no spoken dialogue. And that's because I guess with phonographs, they have these, and I guess it was kinetoscopes were the tools, but it was hard to sync sound. Phonographs has wax cylinders that would often break. So the technology really wasn't there until you get into the 1920s. And then you have the Jazz Singer in 1927, which is the first film with a sung song. So that's about the time you're getting into like, okay, we can do audio and film in a successful way. So Lights in New York in 1928 was the first to have audio dialogue all the way through, which made it kind of the hallmark of the talkie revolution, which is where now you have actors talking and it's not just cards you're reading. Um, But what's interesting is the first soundtrack you could buy came out in 1938, and it's an animated film. Christopher, do you have any guesses? I'm sure you've seen this and are very familiar with it.
Uh, Fantasia.
So you're not far off. It's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and
Uh,
that kind of
I was
has
actually I was thinking about that, and then I was like, well, I think Fantasia's before that, but yeah.
it kind of has elements of horror. You have your poisoned apple, evil queen, haunted forest, right? Like,
Yeah, totally.
it's a fairy tale.
Well,
Which,
I mean, the actual Snow White, I believe the Grimm's brothers version of it is more of a horror.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of a fun tidbit. But we're going to be talking about obviously the more modern stuff. And I mean, when I say modern stuff, this is like 30, 40, 50 years ago and a little more recent.
Yeah.
But the 70s is really where you started seeing soundtracks. You had three kind of musical horror films come out in the 70s, and that was The Son of Dracula, which featured Ringo Starr from the Beatles, and it was kind of a musical. Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise, and a year or two later, you had Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is a musical foremost, but has these strange and creepy characters. You have Tim Curry and Meatloaf, and of course, it's leaning as a musical. So that soundtrack became huge, right? And also, you had The Wicker Man, which came out in 73, and that soundtrack was a blend of like folk music and psychedelic rock that really influenced the neo folk music in the years to come. And Daniel Saplinski was telling me this at Horror Trivia, and I was like, oh shit, that's pretty interesting. But what really I think changed in the way that we looked at soundtracks is in the 80s, you had MTV that came out August 81, and then that really like opened the floodgates for this stuff.
Mhm.
But I do want to mention this movie that's kind of obscure that happened in 81 because this is just kind of fascinating. It was called See No Evil, and that soundtrack is fucking crazy. It had Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads. I think it had a Sex Pistol song. It had Blitzkrieg Bop. It had the Boomtown Rats, all this stuff. And by today's standards, if you wanted to license those songs, it'd be greater than the budget of the movie. So I thought that they didn't license it, but apparently he did, and it was just a lot cheaper back then. So as time goes on, you have all these soundtracks that kind of came out, and it's pretty wild because there's a lot of recurring songs. So like, if you think about it, this is my theory that Don't Fear the Reaper by the Blue Oyster Cult is probably the most used song in horror movies. That's like a pop or radio hit, it was in Halloween, but it's just kind of playing when the car is going. So it doesn't jump out at you, but a version or a cover was in Scream, The Frighteners, it was in Zombieland, it was in X, it was in Night of the Reaper, but it was also on the made-for-TV series The Stand that Mick Garris did of the Stephen King novel, and it's such a great way to open it because it's just showing you all these dead bodies in the space, in the cafeteria and the lounge, it's just these panning shots of this, and that it really jumped out at me when I saw that, and it's also the song that made Stephen King write the movie. He was on a writer's block, so I thought that was just kind of interesting. So, Christopher, you just watched Fright Night, and you kind of touched on that soundtrack, and so that's one of the bigger ones. Like Jay Giles' band had written the theme song Fright Night specifically for that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah. I did notice, since this was on my mind, how many needle drops and stuff were in the film that were integrated in a way that like was really interesting and satisfying.
Yeah, it's got a cool soundtrack for sure. And I mean, you're seeing that with Repo Man, which a lot of LA punk bands, Iggy Pop wrote the theme song for that. You're seeing it in Lost Boys, which I was told, I mean, I was too young to realize this. I guess the soundtrack, when they put that out, it was like Twilight level, promotion for it. And music stores everywhere, you're seeing that. And Lost Boys actually is one of my favorite soundtracks to this day. It's hard for me to say what I think is the best soundtrack. Do you have a favorite one, Christopher?
I don't know if you call this horror. I think it kind of is, but I really love the Crow soundtrack. A lot of that has to do with my age at the time the movie came out. and my love for the movie, and also the kind of music I was listening to at the time. It just kind of like ticked all the boxes. But I think it suits the movie really well. And also I think there's no doubt that it had like a really big cultural influence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was like peak of alternative music, 1994.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's interesting in the comic book, like I was reading about that because I figured we'd be talking about the Crow soundtrack, is like, I guess when The Cure was asked to do a song, Robert Smith was expecting to do Hanging Garden. He was a fan of the comic because they wrote, I guess the lyrics of Hanging Garden were in it, but he was like, no, we're going to write our own song. So him and the drummer recorded, it was just the two of them, wrote Burn. And then that was the last thing that drummer ever did with The Cure. I thought that was kind of interesting. Apparently, Peter Hook from Joy Division was asked to do, I think, Love Will Tear Us Apart, and he didn't, or then maybe it was going to be like Dead Souls, and it didn't work out. So that's where Nine Inch Nails came in to do it. And I think Trent Reznor was a huge part of getting all the bands for the soundtrack.
Cool.
So, something that's kind of funny to me is Pantera's on it covering Poison Idea, the song The Badge, and the Poison Idea song as well has like a sample before it that says Suck on This, and it's Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver. And Pantera put that before their song, and that's also on the fucking Crow soundtrack. So you have like, I don't know how the licensee works for it, but it's probably the only soundtrack that has a sample from another movie in it.
That's
And
interesting.
for all you hardcore kids out there, the Rage Against the Machine song "Darkness" was originally an Inside Out cover, which is Zach's pre-hardcore band on Revelation Records. It's called "The Darkness Agreed," and if you go on YouTube, you can hear the original iteration. I think they only played it live, but I thought that was kind of wild. But yeah, The Crow had such a wild soundtrack that it was huge. You know, it's
Right.
probably one of the biggest soundtracks of the 90s.
Yeah. What I really liked from the 80s also is the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack, which is like a classic, I think, for people from the punk rock world, at least.
Yeah, it's a fun story about that is apparently Dan O'Bannon, who was the director, did not want a fucking punk soundtrack. And he had to be convinced otherwise. And whoever the producers were did good on that because it kind of gave it some credibility, I think. Like if you watch Lost Boys, there's a lot of punk rockers on the boardwalk, and then there's a scene where they're circle pitting around a fire to Aerosmith, and you're like, no, 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 that's not what
Yeah.
it's. They would be doing that to Blast or something. But the interesting thing about the Returning Living Dead soundtrack is you have the Rocky Erickson, the Cramps, TSOL is my favorite TSOL song. 45 Graves, Party Time, which I have kind of a funny story about, is that is not the original version of it. The original version is much darker and much more screwed up. So that's called the zombie version. And Christopher, you may have been with me at this because I remember you came to Sticky Rice karaoke in DC years and years ago. And you did, I don't know if it was a Toby Keith song. Does that sound familiar to you?
Oh yeah. It's my go. It's one of my go-tos. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I did get that right. They had Party Time by 45 Graves, so I was like, sweet, I'm gonna get up there and do this. Little did I know it was not the Return of the Living Dead version, so it has this crazy like preamble that's just like threw me off, and the lyrics are all disturbing, like just not the curveball you want when you do karaoke. But
No, no. I got a great karaoke story just like that, which you also were present for, I believe. But I won't belabor this episode with that because it's not really related. But that certainly is. It's actually one of my worst nightmares at this point, based because of that early experience in life. So
what kid did karaoke? So getting a
no, just
curveball.
like getting up and bombing at karaoke because you were prepared, like the song version's different. That like
Yeah.
you know,
It's funny because I knew that they had this other version, like the original version of, but I'm like, that's not going to be a karaoke because that's such a deep cut. Like, but yeah, rude awakening. So yeah, I mean, do you because there's so many movies, can you think of a best use of a song in a horror movie?
oh yeah, um, yeah. So and you mean like where they how they edited it into the actual film?
Yeah, and how it suits it, because I think that could be such an interesting thing to consider. I have a few different ones I can touch
I
on,
do
but
too. I actually this was like one of the categories that I wasn't sure I would have a lot to say on, but actually I ended up having like the most to say on. So but yeah, I have a bunch. I don't have to say all of them, but the one that you mentioned earlier, the Stranger Things Kate Bush one is like has to be mentioned just because it's like uh iconic, I guess. Currently iconic. But I really liked the use of Hurdy Gurdy Man in Zodiac.
ah, yeah, that's a good one.
That montage of like, a few different killings and stuff. It's really well done. Perfect tone, it's set by it. Let's go back and forth. What you got one?
So this one is kind of like fun, but what's interesting about it to me is I think the song is actually scary. So it plays really well. It's a Night of the Demons. Angela has just gotten possessed by a demon. You don't quite know that, and they're in this abandoned haunted house for Halloween, and it's just her and this guy Stooge, and she starts dancing, and she's wearing like a wedding dress, but it's gothic, so it's like black, and she's got a black tiara. She
Yeah.
starts dancing to Stigmata Martyr by Bauhaus. And at the age I saw it, I had never heard anything like that. But it's a creepy mute. Like the riffs are just kind of jarring, and it's very. I love the song, but it is creepy as fuck. And she's dancing, and then she turns into a demon, and you know, spoiler, bites his tongue out when he thinks she's gonna kiss him. But it's like, yeah, you see that, and it's just perfect. It's
Yeah.
it's it's really wild. So I like that because it's a scary song playing into a scary moment.
I also really like the song, in terms of the use of a song in a movie. The Cabin in the Woods had that kind of moment. This might be a spoiler if you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods. If you haven't, you should go see it and mute this part for a minute. But they play there's a woman like getting killed, and it kind of goes through a security camera, and then you see backstage or behind the scenes of like, you know, the people orchestrating all of the monsters, and they're all at REO Speedwagon Roll with the Changes is playing, and they're all like sipping on drinks and stuff while this like brutal murder is like taking place. It's pretty genius.
I remember the scene. I wish I remember. I remember the use of that Nine Inch Nails song as soon as it ends, like
Yeah,
off broken.
yeah, yeah.
The first band I ever saw live was the Jesus and Mary Chain in 1992 when I was a kid. And the reason I went and saw them is I saw Pet Cemetery too. And the song Reverence by them is used in that in a very crazy scene where Gus, who's a zombie, is driving to kill his wife and stepkid. And the song Reverence has like really dark lyrics. I want to die just like Jesus Christ. I want to die on a so like 12-year-old me is like, this is the greatest thing ever. And so I went and saw them because of that movie.
Oh, cool.
Tad Payton, his mom took us, our friend Skip, who sadly passed away, went, and there was someone there who was like teasing us because we liked the song from Pet Cemetery too. But Pet Cemetery 2 has a cool soundtrack. And so that was like very pivotal for me. Another one is when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street 4. And Taffet and I have talked about this. There's the montage where Rick has the nunchucks, and anything anything by Dramarama plays. And I remember having that on video in Maine out in the sticks. And I'm like, what fucking song is this? And I go to the end where you can see what the soundtrack, but I tried to pause it, and when you pause, the white noise of it just blurred. So I didn't know who it was. And I was like, this is the coolest song ever. So like moments like that in movies, that's how I discovered some music and
Yeah.
bands.
I mean, honestly, I'm sure there's been some. I had that phenomenon a lot more with skate movies, skate videos.
Skate videos, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I've certainly. I think I'm the kind of person, particularly when I was younger, that just got caught up in this story. I like. Uh, Maybe I didn't. Actually, I do have one that I can remember vividly, tracking down the artist. And what's interesting is they're actually on my list of something I wanted to mention today, and that is Tangerine Dream for the
Yeah.
Legend soundtrack, Loved by the Sun. I mean, at the age that I found that, which I was probably like, 12 or something like that. Honestly, I was into like musical soundtracks and like whatever was on the radio because I was so young. Like, I mean, we all were, yeah, undeveloped into like our own tastes at that point. But to this day, that song is still a banger. I love it, but I looked it up. I figured out where it was. I think I even went and bought a tape. So, yeah,
Damn. The Brian Ferry song on that, "Is Your Love Strong Enough," is fantastic.
yeah, it's a
I
great soundtrack.
I mean, a lot of them are. It's a great, and it's cool too when you have soundtracks where songs are written specifically for movies.
Oh yeah, man, I had just another thing. I had like a number of things written down that I could talk about. But I think one that really sticks out to me is, well, I mentioned Tangerine Dream, so that was a perfect segue into this. But I also really liked Cry Little Sister, uh,
Oh yeah.
which Gerard McMahon wrote for the Lost Boys. I'm sure that was probably on your list too.
That's yeah, that opening with that song just like transported me right into the movie. I was obsessed with that song. Still am. I've done that at karaoke too. Because yeah, you see that. How can you not? Yeah, that is such. It fits the movie so well. The tone
Yeah.
and just the vibe of it.
Mhm.
Never land, Peter Pan and stuff.
And
I have like
it became like a banger, like you said, that plays at like 80s nights and whatever. Like it's certainly transcended the movie at this point.
right, like it's even hard for me to think of like what the score of Lost Boys is because I felt like they always came back to that. It
Yeah.
almost like substituted for that. But yeah,
That and
that's
the sax man on the beach is the other thing that always sticks in my mind.
so yeah, Timmy Capella, and I met him at a horror convention. I was like, I have to meet him, and he's like the nicest dude ever that I've ever met at one of those. So excited to talk to like fans. And going into Lost Boys soundtrack, this is very fascinating. The song he does is I Still Believe is by a band called The Call. He's a Christian rock band of faith. And I think they wouldn't give Joel Schumacher the song. So Joel Schumacher was like, hey, Timmy. And Timmy Capello was Tina Turner's sax player, if you didn't know that. He asked Timmy Capello to do the song. He's like, okay, but there's no sax part. He's like, all right, yeah, you got to write the sax part. So he add that, which I think adds something because saxophones were very
Like
80s.
that's really interesting. But this is where what I really want to know though is why him? Like, why did you pick a sax player of all the people?
I guess he was like friends of him, or maybe he's a fan of his physique because he's like greased up, all muscles, spandex.
Totally. I
like,
mean, that's probably has a lot to do with it. But I'm just sort of like funny. It's like you could probably find a guitar player like that, or like a singer or something.
I
But
mean,
I
I
just
guess he was
interesting
maybe.
choice.
Yeah, no, I mean, but yeah, there's probably like a lot of reasons. And I think Santa Cruz also wouldn't let Lost Boys use the name Santa Cruz. That's why it's called Santa Carla. But that's kind of a fun thing for that soundtrack. I mean, the whole soundtrack's cool. You have Echo and the Bunnyman doing the Doors. You have
Love that cut in the Bunnyman.
the singer
Yeah.
of Foreigner, who I never really got into Foreigner, but Lost in the Shadows is also a great song. There's oddly the only song off that charted was the In Excess song that's escaping my mind that was in it, and very very minor.
Interesting.
But yeah, it was Lost Boys was made for the MTV generation, so it makes sense it had such a big one. If you talk about songs that were like specifically made for movies, right? Pet Cemetery by the Ramones
That was also
is.
one I had listed, but I figured you or Taffeta were going to mention it. So
I mean, how can you? It's my favorite Ramones song. I know everyone like punk rockers love the first stuff, but I'm like, no, that song's just the hook. It's got a sadness to it. It's the legend behind that's pretty wild. Where like Stephen King invited the Ramones to his house. Dee Dee picks up Pet Cemetery, leaves for an hour, comes back. It's like, I got the song and lyrics. Like that's fucking, and it's that song. And it's perfect for the movie. And it's interesting because if you ever think like, how did you get into punk rock? I'm like, okay, I guess technically it would have been loving that song or Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It's the Dickies that's doing the theme song, well before I know what that kind of music is. So it's cool when movies would have that. I mean, I can't think of maybe the Smile 2 soundtrack probably had that artist write songs for it.
yeah, I got a fun little bonus one to talk about for as in terms of songs written for movies,
Well, go
uh,
for it.
which is Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Ah, okay. That was written
Which
for a
was
movie.
it was originally intended to be um it was actually a stage musical, which so it's not really a movie, but it was for Nosferatu, a version of Nosferatu.
Really?
Yeah, and it didn't end up obviously being used in that, and that's part of why it was so long. And it's like there's two versions. There's the radio edit and the original edit. And the original edit's like 7 minutes long, and so they wrote the radio edit, but it turns out everybody loved the song so much they would always just play the full version. So
That's wild. It's also it was used in Urban Legend, and it was used in Strangers Pray at Night at one of the most cinematic. It's a death sequence in a pool that's lit up at night. Very cool
uh,
scene. And
yeah,
Strangers 2 has another scene with Air Supply making love out of nothing at all. That's great. Where this girl's like crawling across a bridge and this burning truck is behind her, slowly gaining on her. Yeah, it had some really great soundtrack moments that translated really well.
yeah. But if you listen to some of the lyrics in Total Eclipse of the Heart, like "Turn Around, Bright Eyes," that's like kind of meant to it's referring to the moment like right before getting bit when like the
Mm.
vampires, stuff like that. So I thought that was just like a little like cool story I found while digging into this stuff a little bit more.
No,
So
it certainly is. I did
yeah.
not. I had no idea, but I'm glad I know. Good job. That's a very fun fact. One movie where every song was written for the soundtrack that I feel like you kind of have to talk about. It's more horror adjacent in the '90s, and it was even before The Crow. It was before Natural Born Killers, but it made a huge splash. Was Judgment Night? That's with Emilio Estevez and Jeremy Piven's in it. Cuba Gooding Jr. and Dennis Leary and Steven Dorff, and they're trying to go to a boxing match, and they try to take a shortcut through the ghetto of Chicago and break down, and then it's like they're fighting for their lives. And the soundtrack is not my favorite kind of music, but the soundtrack rules. They decided we're gonna get all the alternative acts we want and mix it with all the hip hop groups. So you have Biohazard and Onyx doing Judgment Night. You have Del the Funky Homo Sapien and Dinosaur Jr. doing Missing Link. Teenage Fan Club with De La Soul. Slayer and Ice-T doing a exploited medley of three of their songs for War.
Wow. Well,
But
that's cool.
it's a really cool soundtrack. Like, and but it's done. It's good, I think, because it's like you have the best doing one side of music and the best from another and combining it rather than like rap rock, which is usually like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many great songs that I've learned that were written for horror movies. A lot of them I didn't even know were written for horror movies. There's like a bunch I didn't even mention, like AC/DC, Maximum Overdrive, and Motorhead, Hellraiser, stuff like that.
Well, so the AC/DC song "Who Made Who" was written for Maximum Overdrive. Like Stephen King influenced pop culture and music as well. We wouldn't have Pet Cemetery, the song, or "Who Made
Yeah,
Who," which are both great songs.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. That's just classic,
s-
use of it in the film too.
so the Hellraiser, that's interesting because Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. I was going to mention this too. It's kind of like the Headbangers Ball of Hellraiser movies. It has actually the dude for John Feldman's old band, like love something, Sonic Love Pigs. I'm screwed it up. They were on that, which kind of blew me away. But the Hellraiser song, Hellraiser, that Motorhead does that you're talking about, was an Ozzy song on No More Tears that Lemmy covered that became the Hellraiser song. That's a cool video too. It's like all these songs become Halloween playlists for me,
Totally.
or a lot of them. So yeah, that was a thing in the 80s and 90s. Towards like the 2000s, you start getting into the more new metal stuff, which is not my jam. But you, Christopher, you would pose this, and we could answer this like most hated song in a horror movie soundtrack.
God, yeah. What's funny is I did suggest like this category, and I put a lot of thought into it, and I realized that I don't hate. I couldn't pick just one, but what I really hate is more of a genre, uh, or a genre of uses, which is like anytime that you use like a pop song that just feels very discordant with what's happening on screen in a. Sometimes you can do that, and it works really well because it's like the juxtaposition of the two elevates the scene. But
Right.
There's a lot of times where I feel like they're like, "Hey, we just need a pop song," and they, like, kinda shoehorn it in, and it just kinda kills, like, whatever's on screen, and it just feels discordant, and it doesn't work, you know? And that happens a lot, I think, with what you're talking about with, like, new metal stuff. Like, a lot of honestly, in general, I find rock music, uh, in many scenarios, don't work on screen. And horror is one of the genres where they work more often, but it has to be like the right moment for it. Otherwise, it can be really jarring and like it just, I think part of it is like when you have like electric guitars and drums and things like that, it just, it automatically, at least for me, puts me in a certain place, which is like a contemporary, like, almost like you're at a music club or something, which like, if you're like, if it's supposed to be scary or like a period piece, like I really hate electric guitars and period films
Yeah, no,
with a
I
passion.
agree. That's that
So,
just yeah, you can't imagine Slayer in Game of Thrones or something. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I couldn't really pick one song or narrow it down. And I'm just having a trouble thinking of moments too. Maybe because like I just don't know who the band is or the movie because I'm just like, oh, that was bad. You know?
I had to look this up too because I was like, well, let me go through my list of songs that I hate, and then they like none of them were in horror movies, and so I'm like, well, I don't like new metal, but I don't remember all these songs from Queen of the Damned or whatever soundtracks. But then I came across a song that I hate that was used in a couple. It was used in Dracula 2000, and it was used in the Dawn of the Dead remake, and that is "Get Down with the Sickness" by Disturbed. Just obnoxious. I also do not like the singer. He signed bombs, like,
Uh-huh.
so to hell with him. But yeah, the song was just obnoxious. It was like peak new metal in the 2000s.
Right.
Some people
Right.
probably love that song, but I was not one of
Well,
them.
as a note to filmmakers out there, when you're making these kind of choices, you know, think about how your film could or could not be timeless because of some of these choices. And so if you're picking something like new metal, which like it's always hard in the moment to see, so this isn't an easy job, but the moment you hear like a new metal in a song, you're like, this is clearly early 2000s or whatever.
Right.
But sometimes it works to your advantage though, because when you watch an 80s horror movie and you hear like 80s music, sometimes it just is like perfect. But sometimes it's, kind of like what you're saying last episode about the A24 look in terms of cinematography is like,
Right.
you can really ruin the evergreen life of your film by putting in music that's like a one hit wonder or like, I mean, not necessarily a one hit wonder, but like, is only popular for a limited period of time. It could really date it.
Yeah. I mean, it's only like the 80s is also the kind of like an explosion of new music, right? And new special effects and new this, that. 2000s is kind of, I mean, the 90s or the 80s hangover, and 2000s is the 90s hangover, but it's I felt like it was almost soulless to just shovel down new metal into all these soundtracks because it's like probably record companies and what's hot right now, that's what they're
Well,
doing.
100%. They're, when you talk about economics, they want to tie in with someone who's popular because, you get the song trending. It also, encourages people to go see the movie. And so there's like real economic reasons that they try to do that sometimes.
Right.
There are exceptions though, right? And this might be a good segue into potentially the next category we could talk about. But if there's a needle drop, which we use that term in the industry, if you're not familiar, whenever you use like a licensed song in the movie, um, it's called a needle drop. But if you do that, with like say somebody playing it on the jukebox or perhaps an actual band playing in the movie that you're filming, you can kind of like get around that a little bit because you're not setting it to the story and trying to get, you're not in danger of breaking the fourth wall by including it. Um, Maybe we could talk about best performances in a
So I'll say one of my I think the best performance, just because it's so cool and it's interesting in a historical context, is in The Hunger. You have David Bowie watching, I think, Bauhaus, and Bauhaus covered in Ziggy Stardust. So it's this real like goth like.
that's so funny.
So I just thought it was interesting that a band that's covering David Bowie is in a David Bowie movie where he's like a stars. and is at this goth club and stuff. I just like that's kind of fascinating. It's a cool, very cinematic, stylish performance, goth type thing. We had touched on the Lost Boys with Timmy Capello, and Taffeta brought that up too. And that was such like a what the fuck is this moment when you first are watching, but it just feels part of the culture. Of course, there's a
Totally.
band playing on the boardwalk, but why is this dude like a beefcase all oiled up? Like it's just, but it's like a fun thing, and everyone's rocking out, and the
Yep.
band,
And see, that's a good example of what I was just talking about, where it's like, let's be honest, by today's standard is like super corny and kind of, is his like mullet and everything is so 80s like cheese in a way. But because it's like this live performance, it like integrates so well into the film. And it like, because of that, it's like, I actually think a lot of people think about that scene when they think about Lost Boys. Like for me, it always stood out and like,
yeah.
that's part of why, but I don't hate it. Like it works in the film because it's like organically, woven into it.
Yeah, if it feels like it's the world,
Yeah,
the time and the place and all that.
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
and one I think we both were going to talk about was like Green Room, right?
Hmm.
And what's interesting about that is it's a punk band that a show fell through, so now they need money, and they go and they play some sketchy venue out in the backwoods in Oregon, and it's to like neo Nazis. And so, being a punk band, what are they gonna? One of them's like, "I got a bad idea. Let's do it." And they cover the Dead Kennedys, Nazi punk, fuck off. And they perform it, and of course, that's the punk thing to do. And so
Yep.
that's kind of built into it. I don't know that many punk bands would actually go play a neo-Nazi venue in real
Yeah.
life, but
Well, I think
but
part of the thing is that they didn't know when they took the thing.
that it
It
was
was like
quite that.
they
Right.
needed the gas money, and then the guy was like, "I got you a show," and they're
Right.
like, "All right, well," and they show up, and they're like, "Fuck it,
Y-
let's burn this place down."
Right.
What's great about this particular song in this movie too, and this is like where you really hit the trifecta, I guess. It's like a good song, it's woven into the movie, but it also furthers the plot, which
Yeah.
is a really hard thing to do with a song in a movie, right? Because like there are limited opportunities to do that, but in this case, it was like brilliant because it motivates what happens next.
No, I absolutely. It was a very smart idea on director Jeremy's.
Yeah.
Well, I will say something else pretty wild about Green Room. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and I grew up literally across the street from the director Jeremy Saunier. So I got a chance to see Green Room before a lot of people. It was a private screening, not because I didn't know him, I just knew who he was. But our friend Nikhil was able to arrange this, so I got to see a private screening in Beverly Hills. And when I'm watching it, the Ain't Rights are the punk band in that, and their songs are originals, except they're not. They're songs by this band Missionary Position that was only at a demo tape in Alexandria. So they play the song Coronary, and I'm just like, holy fuck, that's like, think of a local band in your town, and then all their song is in a movie like that. So that just blew me away that like that he was repurposing songs, and two of the characters are Tiger was named after my friend Ned, and Tad was named after Tad Payton.
Wait,
And
he was named after Ned? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
that's Tad's. Ned was in a band called. He was also in a band very shortly with Jeremy, but Ned was in a band called the Baseball Furies with Sam Jones and the other members of Missionary Position, including the singer who was in Blue Ruin and Burger Party. But where I'm getting sidetracked. But yeah, they called him Tiger, and so that's why the singer of the Ain't Rights is called Tiger, and then the
That's a
kid with
really
the
great
mohawk
story.
is named Tad. So I
Yeah,
spoiled that for them after having seen the
yeah,
movie before they did.
yeah. And
But
for you at home, Ned and Ted are old friends. Peter's better friends with them, but I also knew them back in high school. So like 30 years ago. So it's cool to hear these stories.
so yeah, there was some like inside baseball into Green Room that was pretty fascinating. And so I was even like looking this up. I was like, yeah, Baseball Furies just had the one demo, and I look it up on the Discogs page, and someone had been like, "Yo, I lost my demo of this, but how the fuck did that song Coronary get in Green Room?" Like, so
Well, hey,
someone else.
and the composers that did the score of Green Room are they are the composers that we also worked with on
Yes, the Blair brothers.
the Blair Brothers? Yeah, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I grew up with Will, the youngest of the Blair brothers, also from Alexandria. He Will composes scores with Brooke, and their older brother Macon is a director and actor. And Macon was one of the skinheads in Green Room, and he was the star of Blue Ruin. But he's also been in Oppenheimer, and he did the Toxic Avenger remake, and yeah, he's making a lot of cool
He's
stuff.
a director. So he both acts and directs, basically.
Yeah, and I think he writes too. So yeah, there's a lot of cool people from Alexandria. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it
so
was cool to work with them. Obviously, you know, we kind of batted it a little outside of our league on getting them for our short film. But luckily, because of the Alexandria connection, they were willing to work with us. And they did a really great job. And who knows, maybe we could get them on the podcast at some point.
other thing, the last thing I'll say about Green Room is like a lot of metal bands are on it. Slayer, Poison Idea, another song of theirs, Bad Brains. But it has this band Midnight. I like Evil Like a Knife is a song, and the reason I mentioned this is there was a horror movie called Deathgasm it's like a metal horror movie, and that also had Evil Like a Knife, came out same year, 2015. So cool, just kind of a cool coincidence.
Yeah, so there's a number of performances that actually I thought we could talk about, but like I'll for brevity's sake, I'll just mention a pair from Wednesday, the show, which I feels a little cheating because it's like not hard horror and it's like more recent, but also they're just so well done. Um, the first one I wanted to mention is when Wednesday's playing Paint It Black on the cello, and it's kind of at the climax of that episode, and it's like, a montage, a musical montage of like different action of different characters happening, but she's on the roof and playing, and it's just so well done, and her performance in terms of acting it, I don't know if she's actually playing it. It's a really good question, but like the way that she acts it is really great too. So iconic scene. And then probably the most iconic scene from Wednesday is at the school winter dance or whatever when she does her weird Adam's Family dance to Goo Goo Muck by the Cramps.
Right.
And that thing trended forever. And I think it became like a dance craze even a little bit. So on TikTok or something. Yeah.
It was a moment. And the Cramps are in a lot of cool soundtracks.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean,
Yeah.
they're like horror punk. The greats.
Psychobilly. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 soundtracks features the Cramps, and I think IRS Records put it out. Best Oingo Boingo song, or one of them, as well. And yeah, Return of the Living Dead, the Cramps are on that. They're in Near Dark. They're just in a league of their own. So it's always cool when they pop up.
Right. A League of Their Own? That's a random one.
No, not the movie. Man, that'd be kind of wild if they were in that too.
Nice.
But yeah, no, it's always cool when Cramp songs pop up. They were on 90210. I will say that there's a Halloween episode and they played on that.
Ah, funny.
A little outside of horror, but just kind of amusing.
Related. I mean, it's Halloween. It's a Halloween party.
Yeah, it's true. And that's why they were on that. And I guess if we want to get into, were there any other performances, or were those the ones?
I just an honorable mention, real quick, to and it's honestly could be the top one is in Sinners, the live performance by Miles Canton, the character's named Sammy, of "I Lied to You," and it was just like one of those scenes in the film where it's like expresses the theme. And it's very memorable scene, and I think like they really were trying to say something with it, but his performance, and it was all done live. Apparently, it
Oh,
just
damn.
like it really came together, and it was like I mean it's going to be a classic, if it's not already.
Right.
So
No, I'm sure. Yeah, Sinners was humongous.
yeah,
I feel like before we wrap things up, there's just a couple soundtracks that we kind of have to talk about.
please, yeah.
One is like all right, so in the 80s that was shit was bonkers. Nightmare on Elm Street had different movies with different songs. Part 3 had Dawkins. Dream Warriors was a big one. I think they had a couple other songs on the soundtrack. 4, you had Dramarama, Blondie, Divinals. 5, Bruce Dickinson wrote the song "Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter" for the soundtrack, and then Iron Maiden's like, "Wait, we want this to be our song." So then they made it an Iron Maiden song. 6, the soundtrack's put out by Metal Blade. The Goo Goo Dolls wrote really cool song. Damn, I'm gonna screw up the name. It's like "Don't Go to Sleep" or "Don't Fall Asleep." Had a couple songs on that. Iggy Pop wrote the theme song for that too. He had a song. So Elm Street's really like went all in on soundtrack stuff from time to time. I mentioned the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 soundtrack, which had some Lords of the New Church as well, was on that. The Demons movie, the Italian Crazy Gonzo movies had wild soundtracks. The Smiths, Panic is on one of them. The Cult is on the soundtrack to the sequel. You had White Wedding. You had what's that pop song? You I think Accept the metal band. I'm just kind of going through what stuff off the top of my head, but they're pretty robust soundtracks. So you're like, whoa, this is crazy. A funny one that is amusing with a quick little story is the Shocker soundtrack. That was Wes Craven's late 80s. I think they wanted him to come up with a new Freddy Krueger. So you get Horace Pinker, who's like a guy who gets electrocuted and then comes back to battle the protagonist. And I have a big soft spot for Shocker, but Desmond Child, who's a guy who was a hit maker, he went on to write the Thong Song, and he wrote "Livin' La Vida Loca." He was in charge of the Shocker soundtrack, so he put together this super group called Dudes of Wrath, and it was like Tommy Lee of Motley Crue, someone from Alice Cooper's band, one of the guys in Def Leppard, and they wrote this theme song, Shocker, which is just wild because it starts out like a Megadeth song and it ends up like a Journey or Andrew WK song. And I absolutely love it. And then I think like Megadeth did No More Mr. Nice Guy on the soundtrack. Really wild soundtrack that I think was a bit of a fluke, but they were ramping up, and it's just kind of wild that Desmond Child was the dude behind that. It's like, all right, guys, let's do this. So there's soundtracks, man. There's so
there's
many.
a lot of them out there.
There's too many to cover.
There's some that aren't like explicitly horror and genre that are also complete bangers, like the Can't Hardly Wait soundtrack and stuff like that. But
all the John Hughes stuff.
Yeah, all the John Hughes stuff. I mean, we had to limit ourselves, and since we focus so much on horror and genre, that's what we were talking about. But man, a good soundtrack can really set the tone for a movie, and then it's a good way to like, kind of bring that movie into your life and like think about it when you're like listening to music and driving to work or whatever.
And for younger people, it's a great gateway to discover new music. I mean, you have so many outlets now. It's not the same where, you go see a movie and you're exposed to something and you're like, that's the only way you're going to hear this. But it's still, as you see with Stranger Things, in these big shows that was doing it. And, I mean, Stranger Things wasn't even the first one to do it. The Sopranos ended with "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey. So TV shows were doing that. The teens, there was a show called The Following where Kevin Bacon was hunting the serial killer who was doing all these Edgar Allan Poe reenactments of murders from his stories, and that had like Refused, New Noise, Danzig, How the Gods Kill. And so you would see this, but like now that everything's streaming, that's where you get the most mileage for those songs.
I think it's a good place to leave it. You got to do anything interesting this week or next 2 weeks, really?
Hopefully. I kind of want to see that movie Leviticus.
Oh yeah.
I saw someone was saying it's like a cross between Talk to Me and It Follows. So I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, I know. I'm surprisingly pretty interested in that. I mean, it's not surprising, but when I first found out about it, I was like, it's a movie. It could be good. But now I'm like, oh, I want to see that.
Right. So I know that just came out. So there's that. I'm sure there's things like always writing.
Yeah, totally. Always writing.
So we got that. How about you?
Yeah, same. I'm interested in checking out Leviticus. I just want to kind of get back to work in some of my own and our projects. It's kind of the usual stuff, really. I mean, it's the summer. There's not like a ton of movies coming out, so I'll probably use the opportunity to catch up on some things that I haven't gotten to so far this year. So
Right on, man. Yeah, summer is here.
that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode. If you're still listening, thanks for sticking around till the end. If you want to check out today's show notes, you can go to our website at nightmarelogic.net or follow us on Instagram at nightmarelogicpod. We'd like to give a big shout out to our composer, Lars Lang Peterson, for the score. Come back next week where we're going to have some really interesting conversations. Until then, talk to you later.